Okay, so hi everyone and welcome. Thank you for coming to my talk today on supporting plurilingualism in practice. My name is Jane Karanassiou. I am a curriculum manager at Renison University College and a PhD candidate at OISE. So today I'm going to introduce my research approach, discuss my findings, and then put forward recommendations as to why collaboration among language and disciplinary experts is essential in higher education. So the aim of my research is to explore how undergraduate plurilingual students in STEM think about and use their languages in order to inform practices to support student progress. This is an overview of my research approach. So I have layered theoretical background to align with my methodology of interpretive phenomenological analysis in order to explore my research questions. So in my research, I use complexity as a meta theory. Learners, language development, and universities are seen as complex, interacting dynamic systems. The key concepts of complexity that I use, the dynamic openness of systems, nonlinear trajectories, attractors or preferred states, feedback loops, emergence, or how new behaviors and states arise as systems adapt and change over time. Post-structuralism I use as an intellectual strategy or a useful reminder. So the rhizome, for example, captures a non-linear conception of growth as a network of roots. Deconstruction uncovers the fluidity of meaning, and decentering the subject is important to understand that identity does not exist as a static, fixed framework. My methodology, IPA, Interpretive Phenomenological Analysis. This was developed by Jonathan Smith in the mid-1990s as a means of exploring subjective experiences through the interpretative lens of the researcher. So as Smith says, the researcher is trying to make sense of the participant, trying to make sense of what is happening to them. So IPA is not a prescriptive methodology, but it does involve in-depth analysis to develop personal experiential themes before group experiential themes, and findings are reported through detailed narratives and reflective commentary. So the study took place at a university in southwestern Ontario. Participants were 14 formal language pathway students who were at the time enrolled in the faculties of math, science, and engineering. Data was collected over a 12-week semester through semi-structured interviews, think aloud protocols, retrospective reports, and my own analytic memo. So, my findings. Student perceptions and experiences of plurilingualism seem to progress through three quite distinct phases. They started out as highly motivated to engage with English as the language of instruction. This, however, dips as the realities of keeping up with coursework sets in, and finally begins to develop. They value the language more as they develop a pragmatic perspective on how they can be using their languages in their courses. So just having a look at these phases in a little bit more detail. So starting out, phase one is aspirational. They speak of using English as much as possible to avoid troubles. Making connections with others is a primary goal. And at this point, we see evidence of emerging identities as they recite terminology or equations. Phase two, when the realities of coursework and keeping up really begins to take hold. Speed and efficiency is the #1 driver of language use. So as Sam notes, learning words is just considered a waste of time. And as Ronan states, don't care about the language, just finish the homework. In phase three, students begin to value the use of all of their languages. They realize conceptual understanding goes beyond simply learning words or terminology. They also start to value their languages as having slightly different problem-solving logic. So the logical system among languages switches slightly. For example, as Anne explains, something we may see in a straight way, if you understand it through another language, maybe it's a curve. So it's important to remember that these phases do not adhere to a strict time frame. Some students seem to progress through these points within a matter of weeks, others may take years. Some students, however, and this is the area of concern, seem to be positioned in phase 2, where using English or developing their English is a luxury or irrelevant. So this is the phase that I would like to explore in a little more detail. So what are the barriers for these students to engaging with their discipline through English? What is it that's preventing them? So my research indicates 2 primary areas. The first, paradoxically, was a strong sense of linguistic agency. This freedom that students felt to use whichever language they choose is obviously a very welcome shift from monolingual native speaker narratives. However, if this freedom is coupled with a lack of incentive to engage through the target language, through English, it is a concern. The second was the way that STEM education may function as a barrier due to just the nature of studying in STEM and perhaps the structure of their courses. So looking in a bit more detail at the first barrier of linguistic agency. If we see language development as a complex system, the landscape through which the system moves has pockets or attractor states towards which the system naturally evolves. The dominant or most proficient language functions as an attractor state or a magnet, if you wish. Participants speak about an invisible barrier in their brain or a lack of control. In order to disrupt these attractor states, a lot of energy or cognitive resources are required. And without external incentives or support to be engaging through the language of instruction, it is potentially possible for students to remain in that attractor state of relying on their most proficient language, perhaps for the duration of their degree. In addition, studying in STEM, participants talk of a minimal need to engage with any language in their STEM courses. I don't really need language to think, as Lena states. In addition, there was evidence of a general disconnect from the linguistic environment, perhaps in part due to the large lecture-based factor of many STEM courses, particularly in the early years. So the significance of these findings, just in brief. So why is it important? Why should students be engaging with their courses through English? First of all participants stated that they want and expect to be developing their language, developing their English through their discipline while studying. Personal growth and expected outcomes. As we say, yeah, all participants want to develop their English. Belonging or becoming a member of an academic community, that is mediated through language. As Bond states, the language and culture of the discipline are deeply intertwined with the learning context. And then we have future safeguards. It's important to engage with English from the start for these students because of the increasing linguistic demands of their courses. They may not need much language to start with, but that doesn't mean to say that later on they won't be expected to be using language, English, more intensely. In addition, why does it matter for institutions? Recent data from the Conference Board of Canada shows that only 31% students in STEM graduate after 4 years. Student attrition or persistence in STEM are global concerns, and it's worth remembering that identity as a STEM student is mediated through language. And if those identities are intentionally fostered at the start of their academic careers, it may have significant impacts on their outcomes. We also have increased competition from English taught programs in many countries, not necessarily just English-speaking countries. So this brings me to some recommendations here. The ecosystem of higher education is comprised of multiple complex systems. And in order to reposition language, action is needed at multiple levels. So as Nicole states, to avoid uncoordinated interventions dependent on individual personalities, change should be made at the macro level of policies and admissions, meso level of faculties and departments, and the micro level of courses and students. So at the macro level, an over-reliance on standardized examinations positions language as a procedural formality or a box to be ticked. It promotes the view of language as a finite skill rather than something to be developed. However, as Humphrey states, English language development should be viewed as the core business of any university where courses are delivered in English. The language of instruction should be an explicit undergraduate expectation, and changes at the policy level help initiate that shift to make language integral to academic study. So at the meso level of faculties and departments, language is often positioned as a problem in need of fixing in order to engage with scholarly activities. Disciplinary knowledge is often situated as separate, independent of language, and the discourse of a discipline may be developed through osmosis rather than explicit action. So language should be woven into curriculum design and assessment practices for all students in order for them to become familiar with a critical constellation of communicative practices. At the micro level, as my research shows, that lack of incentive to engage with course content through English is a concern. Language supports that exist are often situated as separate from the discipline, again, further enhancing that sense of language academic knowledge divide. So language development should be integrated into all STEM courses for all students, and support for those identities should be ongoing. Oops, sorry. Why is it not letting me go back? Oh, all right.
We're at the bottom now. It looks like
Now it's not forward. Oh, no, it's not forward or back. Yeah, sorry, I don't have the same picture on here. Okay, just very quickly. Yes, thank you. So one of the ways that we can collaborate is through curriculum design. Disciplinary and language experts can work together to reposition language. Disciplinary experts often have very little sense of how they learned the language of their discipline. This knowledge is tacit and so deeply unconscious. Collaborations with language experts can be very fruitful, not for the language expert to learn the discipline, but in order to be asking questions and drawing attention to language that can lift the specialist out of their actual discipline. Okay. Carloni and Johnson's model of science identity is relevant to all faculties in that adopting an identity involves overlapping domains of competence, performance, and recognition. So workshop sessions that are arranged and organized with language and disciplinary experts could allow space to be given for students to be building these identities as they're going through their courses. Oops. Oh. Sorry. All right, finally, conclusion, very quickly. So language should be repositioned and integrated into all courses for all students and repositioned at the macro level, the meso level, and the micro level. Collaborations between language and disciplinary experts would position communication as central to knowledge building, not an optional extra, And learners should be incentivized to engage with their courses through English, as FSU Math student states. Using English without translating feels amazing.
So does math.
Thank you. So does math.